It is all preparation, with each driver having his own ritual, readying himself for the ordeal, putting on the fireproof balaclava, for risk is always present. The mechanics, all busy hands, craftsmen's hands, make the last delicate adjustments, a last tightening here, a tyre pressure there, a wing. In theory, everything has been checked, down to the last infinitesimal detail. Drivers, team managers, team bosses, they all have their last-second rituals. Keaty of Alfa Romeo, relaxed. Frank Williams, intense. Mario Andretti, what has been forgotten? Colin Chapman of Lotus, concentrated. Bernard Eccleston of Brabham, instructive. Gérard Ducarouge of Ligier surveys the scene from the pit lane. Gabbiani and Giacomelli chat. Pironi looks over his car, and the preparations go on. Brian Henton puts on the Warrior's helmet, as does Mario Andretti. The protective gloves go on. In theory, everything is ready. Carlos Reutemann climbs into his car, and the cars head for the grid. Alfa Romeo, Lotus, Enzyme, Tyrrell, Ozella, Arrows, Fittipaldi, McLaren, Ligier. It is Sunday, the first Sunday of the new season, a Sunday of hope, of expectation. There has been a day of arriving. There have been 2 days of practice. There have been conferences, tests, adjustments, and the whole family has concentrated on just one thing, this moment. 3 minutes away. Last season is past. Winter, with its drawing boards and its tests on lonely tracks, is gone. 1 minute to go. In just 60 seconds, the drivers will be alone, completely alone. No advice, no questions. The eyes show the strain. It's all come down to final verities, and good luck to all. Last handshakes, the loneliness of the Formula One driver sets in. The track has emptied. All the people who have prepared this moment in time are gone, and the driver is alone. Each driver in his car, each driver there to win. As he sits there, the track suddenly seems big and empty. But soon it will no longer be. One more ritual remains, the warm-up. One last chance to check up on the engine, to lay down some rubber, and then to settle into the grid. Each car and driver into the position earned by their fastest laps in qualifying. 24 drivers, 24 cars. Millions invested. High hopes. The engines are revved up, the clutch held ready. Anxiety, tension, planning, fearing. The red light, wait for the green, 3, 2, 1. The release from waiting cannot come quickly enough. The heart pumps, the brain works overtime. It is weaving, dodging, trying to get to that first corner first. And then it is the tunnel for 2 hours, thinking of nothing else from start to finish. The season has started. How will it end? 1/15 of the unknown, to be repeated now 14 more times at Buenos Aires, Rio de Janeiro. The streets of Long Beach in California. On the Dino Ferrari circuit at Imola, Italy. And in the tricky weather of Zolder, Belgium. And by the harbour at Monaco. At Jarama in Spain. In the capital of Burgundy, at Dijon, France. Or the classic Silverstone circuit in England. At Hockenheim in Germany. And in the Styrian hills of Austria. On the dunes of Zandvoort, Holland. And then back to Italy, at the high-speed Monza Autodrome. On an island in the St. Lawrence in Montreal, culminate with all the marbles still at stake at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, USA. Thousands of miles of track to be navigated, survived, conquered, each driver against all the rest. Nations with prestige and pride at stake. A test of courage, of endurance, of technique. No championship in sport is so hard for an individual to win. None requires the same tenacity, the same consistency. Lose at Wimbledon, you can still win at Forest Hills as golfers rise and fall. But there is only one driver to be crowned world champion. And the rest are there, despite the races won, and the arms raised in triumph, to be disappointed. But to be a champion, as Alan Jones became in Montreal in 1980, a driver must have the temperament, the skill, the car, the backing, the courage, and above all, the will. A year later, it might be Nelson Piquet who sprays the champagne. But 1981 is to be a very special season. The questions will be asked, and it will take all season to answer them. There is always but one survivor. Only when the season opened, we didn't know who it was to be. Was it to be the 1980 champion, the doughty Alan Jones of Australia? Or might it be his teammate, the Argentine Carlos Reutemann, a 10-year veteran of Formula One, always close, never a winner? Or perhaps the Brazilian Piquet, who had lost the championship to Jones at the very end of the season in 1980. It could be anyone, for a season, every season, begins with everyone equal, at least in their own minds. Jacques Lafitte, for Ligier, for instance, had always been in contention. Then there was Ferrari, always a force to be reckoned with. Ferrari were led by Canadian Gilles Villeneuve, whom many considered to be one of the top drivers of the sport, and backed by the serious, intelligent Didier Pironi. Ferrari were always a threat. There was the hugely talented Alain Prost, driving the turbocharged Renault. Some 30 drivers in all, experienced drivers, old hands, with wins in the book, with experience, knowledge, savvy, survivors all, gathering for the new season. Along with some who classify as old boys, but who either, like Mario Andretti, have been in the doldrums, or, like Jean-Pierre Jabouille or Riccardo Patrese, have not yet equalled the expectations aroused by their talents. And every season, new boys, beginners in a hard trade like Siegfried Storr, or eager novices like Andrea De Cesaris. But it's not up to the drivers alone. It is a sport of men and machines, and teams which hire drivers. The teams have their own championship, won in 1980 by the Saudia Williams car. Some are famous, experienced teams. Two are rich in tradition, though both have been through lean years. The Red Ferrari from Italy, in Formula One since 1950. And Colin Chapman's John Player Special Lotus. There are other teams equally big in backup, in resources, in ambition. The yellow turbocharged Renault. And the Talbot Ligier Gitane, which carry French hope of finally producing a French champion in Formula One. There's the handsomely sponsored Marlboro McLaren team, reorganised this year, but with the heady memory of its championship days with James Hunt still alive. The team is headed by the Irish veteran John Watson. There's the Parmalat Brabham team, whose cars have been so close to the top in recent years. Brabham are owned and raced by the dynamic Bernard Eccleston, president of the Formula One Constructors Association. The team is headed by Nelson Piquet, long tipped for the top, and Mexican Hector Abaque. Its sleek blue and white cars are designed by South African Gordon Murray. There are teams which have been great in the past, such as Ken Tyrrell's, which once swept the championship with Jackie Stewart, but hasn't managed to repeat its triumphs in recent years and now races on a very tight budget. There are teams which were once great, dropped out, and are seeking to come back in at the top level, like the Italian Alfa Romeo, now headed by former world champion Mario Andretti. And there are the lesser fish in this international goldfish bowl: the German ATS team, Teddy Ips Theodore from Hong Kong and Macau, the Italian-sponsored British-run Ragno Arrows team, with Riccardo Patrese and Siegfried Stoll, a psychiatrist by trade, the March team, so prominent in the 70s, and the new Candy Tolman Hart entry, all conquering in Formula 2. All of them start equal. Of course, life is not equal. Not life as we know it. Not Formula 1 racing. Some start with more money than others, bigger resources. As in life, there are the rich and the poor. Some have high-spending, high-living sponsors. Others make do with bits and pieces, deals cobbled together race by race. Champagne and hot lunches, or tea and soup. Some arrive by motorised hang gliders. Some by helicopter. Some on motorbikes. And as every season draws to a close and a new one begins, each car is reinvented, which is what the engineers and the designers do. They are the men you see least and the drivers see most. Their work is done before the race begins and after each race is over, finding out what went wrong, what went right. The drivers are pure information for the engineers. The car does this. It doesn't do that. For engineers, the question is always, why? They too all start equal, except in talent. And even when the talent is there, the new ideas don't always work. Engines burn, or just stop. Things continually go wrong, in small ways and in big. The mystery remains. Why? Because when you look at a succession of Formula 1 cars, they all look the same, especially when they're moving fast. A 3-litre limit on engines, specified weight, height and width, a specified clearance from the ground, safety measures, rubber-filled tanks. It's when you look more closely that you see all cars have personalities. For instance, they have different-sized wings, set at different angles, different suspensions, in different configurations. And, of course, vastly different engines, with, hidden inside, 100 other differences. But all are equal. Supposedly equal in tyres too, which is where the sport is really cutthroat, in pursuit of the perfect tyre, mostly Goodyears and Michelins, but also Pirelli and Avon. Super qualifiers and wet tyres. Some with no tread at all, slicks, and some with very special treads for the rain, but all of them vulnerable to wear, to heat, to puncture all the weather. And changing them is a frantic business, which good teams can get done, all 4 tyres, in 16 seconds. There's one kind of rough equality, and that's called luck, good and bad. The unpredictable, as when Villeneuve misjudges a corner, spins, and takes the innocent Jones with him. Or sheer push and shove, as Reutemann tangles with Lafitte, and Lafitte is hoisted off. Or getting stuck in traffic, with Villeneuve pushed into a spin. And human error, a moment's costly loss of concentration. Brakes can fail or lock. Tyres can fall off without warning. And then you're out of it. Some with disgust, some with pain, always with disappointment. And if all that isn't enough, there's rain, which gets to the drivers and to the spectators. The spectators are always a form of pressure, waving flags, taking pictures, looking decorative. But, for all the glamour they add to the pit lane, generally getting underfoot just when the drivers are at their most nervous and edgy. Like the constructors, the driver can hide from the world in his air-conditioned motorhome. But in the end, he always has to come out again, get back into that car, whether he wants to or not, whether he feels like it or not. Day after day, practice after practice, race after race, season after season. It's always the same profession, the same tensions, the same pressure, the same risk. For every moment on the track is a moment of decision. There's the right line for taking a curve, and it's always the same line. There's the right moment to brake, and that's always the last possible moment. And there is the right moment to pull out from behind and try to pass, and the right moment not to, when you can't. A moment to hold off a challenge, but still try it. And there is always someone in front and someone behind, each of them to be taken into account. And also, as Jones shows, how to pull away from the traffic. And always the possibility of failure, either your own or someone else's. Then comes the time for post-mortems, explanations, which the top drivers never lack. Nelson Piquet looks cheerful. But Carlos Reutemann, one of the real veterans, looks world-weary. He's driven for Ferrari, for Lotus, for Brabham. He's seen them all come and go. And now he's number 2 to Jones at Williams, which perhaps doesn't please him. There's the bright prospect of Alain Prost of Renault, much respected by his peers, a driver for the future, or for this season, all Gallic logic, imperturbable, unchanging. And the fiery Ferrari driver, the Canadian Gilles Villeneuve, natural successor to Ronnie Peterson as the fastest natural driver. There's the irrepressible Jacques Lafitte of Ligier, never far from the top, never so far at the top, and never afraid of controversy. And the former world champion Mario Andretti, now driving for Alfa in the autumn of his career, after a run of disappointing seasons. And Elio De Angelis of the ever-powerful Lotus team, a younger driver not yet at his peak. All of them, old and young, thinking this year is their year. In an atmosphere clouded not only by rain, which has been falling for nigh on 30 days, but by politics, which have been raining on the sport since its inception, real life returns 6,000 feet up at Kyalami. Despite politics, the race, the rain, and the risks are real. Just yesterday, Carlos Reutemann went out into this same rain and wound up with catch fencing around his neck and windpipe, thus coming as close to strangling as you can. Up front, waiting in the rain, are some familiar faces. Nelson Piquet of Brazil from Brabham is on pole, with Carlos Reutemann alongside him. And then some less familiar faces, Keke Rosberg, the Finn, driving for Fittipaldi. Elio De Angelis, who has taken over the #1 drive for Lotus after Andretti's move to Alfa Romeo, and Riccardo Patrese, driving for Arrows. Not far behind on the grid, Nigel Mansell of England in the second Lotus. And Riccardo Zannino of Argentina, lying 7th on the grid, showing the Brabhams are still competitive even in the hands of lesser drivers. As they line up for the start, the big gamble has to be tyres, a bet against the weather. Will the track dry out? Will there be more rain? Do I go out on slicks or wets? Significantly, just 2 drivers opt for slicks, Reutemann and Rosberg. Just what the decision means is obvious from the start. Visibility is near 0, except for Nelson Piquet, who goes off fast and first. The rest, and watch the young Dutch driver Jan Lammers come charging up along the outside, can see next to nothing. John Watson can see nothing. He's caught in the wake of Alan Jones, nicely shut off at the first curve by Lammers. Lammers is having his moment of glory, but soon finds out how fleeting it is. But it's not going to be an easy race for anyone. The cars are trying to walk on water. The only real surprise is that Elio De Angelis, not so far a wet weather specialist, should be staying right up there with the front runners. Piquet seems to be running away with the race, building to his lead without challenge. But the rain has gone. There are bits of dry track, and Piquet's on wet tyres. Jeff Lees has his little appointment with the catch fences. Equally unlucky is the world champion, who comes in to change to slicks. He goes off, but he is soon to be back in again. The Australian is far from happy. Nelson Piquet, meanwhile, comes into the pits to change his tyres. And John Watson inherits the lead, the first time in some years that he's led a race. Like so many moments of glory, it doesn't last long. He too has to change his tyres. And that leaves the wily old fox, Carlos Reutemann, in the lead. He, it will be remembered, started out on slicks in the first place and just hung back until the track dried. Riccardo Patrese's Arrows is taken with consummate ease. And a few laps later, Watson is left. Behind Reutemann's Williams in the closing stages are the early leader, Nelson Piquet, who can't quite catch up, Elio De Angelis in his Lotus, and the surprising Keke Rosberg in the all-new white Fittipaldi, who doesn't seem very willing to let Carlos by. As for Frank Williams, whose cars are starting 1981 in much the same all-conquering spirit as in 1980, he doesn't look all that overjoyed. Maybe because his world champion made a series of wrong guesses. As for the Argentine driver, who would know from his expression that he's just won a Grand Prix? He even leaves it to Elio De Angelis to do the ritual bit with the champagne. Maybe he knows that the result won't stand. Between Kyalami in January and Long Beach in March, peace fortunately broke out in the Formula One family. Skirts were banned. Things looked good for the teams who hadn't raced in South Africa. They'd had time to comply with the new rules. Fortunately for the sport, motor racing is never predictable. It wasn't one of the loyalists who was on pole, but Riccardo Patrese of Arrows. A first pole for both driver and team. It was Patrese who took up the early running in fine style. And behind him, Jones and Reutemann. And then Reutemann and Jones. For lap after lap, Reutemann stuck to Patrese's tail. He didn't threaten him. Patrese was quite at ease. But after all, Reutemann must have thought, you can always hope for a mistake. Not that Ferrari were out of the running. Didier Pironi, having overtaken both Piquet and Villeneuve, was now fourth. As for Renault's Alain Prost, this was not to be his race. He went out early, to De Cesaris, who was to see the record for most crashes in a single year. Piquet was running steadily, but the real battle was still up front between Reutemann and Patrese. Greatly matured since his early wild and woolly days, Patrese was driving a superb race. But not long after, Piquet, doing a Reutemann on Pironi, lined up to pass him. Patrese's engine seems to falter. There is no let-up for the Italian. Reutemann, sensing the kill, tries it on once to see how Patrese reacts, superbly. However, if it doesn't work the first time, try again. And this time Reutemann slips by. Patrese tries to stay with him. But now Jones, too, challenges and goes through. That puts the world champion solidly behind his number two. Not where he belongs, not the safest spot for Reutemann. The unhappy Patrese makes 2 pit stops and then quits. The race is a third over. The pattern is established. 2 Williams up front, and Jones teasing Reutemann. Marc Surer, a tough, competitive driver, goes between Reutemann and Jones, and as they come up to the bend, Reutemann inexplicably makes a dreadful mistake. Surer has to come almost to a dead stop, and Jones simply accelerates past both of them. The rest is history. Piquet is a serene third. Eddie Cheever takes his Tyrrell into 5th. And the world champion is all smiles. Something he will definitely not be after Brazil, where the man he thought of as his chief rival, Nelson Piquet, is on pole position, a good place to be on a wet and uncomfortable day. With his teammate Reutemann second on the grid, Jones must have felt in with a chance, the more so seeing Piquet out on slicks. In fact, with his back wheels spinning, Piquet is left standing. And it's Reutemann, Jones and Patrese. Chico Serra was soon out of it, so were Arnoux and Andretti at the start. And Villeneuve, who had hit Prost in the same early pile-up, was clearly not going to last long. Up front, Reutemann and Jones were running clear, safe as houses. But behind, Pironi was taking up the challenge for Ferrari. A lap behind Prost, he decides to let the Renault driver by, forgetting the outside is one big puddle. Out they go. Nearer the front, John Watson of McLaren and Marc Surer of Enzyme, with Jean-Pierre Jarier behind them, are having a ding-dong. Two super wet race drivers and lots of hairy moments. Until, almost inevitably, it goes wrong. For Watson. Graceful, but off the track. After his terrible start, Piquet was working his way back to respectability, showing the stuff of which champions are made. De Angelis, Surer and Lafitte take each other on. And Piquet battles past Alboreto. While Reutemann and Jones are strolling in the rain, there is drama in the pits. The world champion has no reason to push Reutemann. He's his number 2, after all. That's in the contract. And Frank Williams has shown Carlos the board, which Carlos doesn't see. Maybe it's the umbrellas. But regardless, win Reutemann does. So that when the race is over, it's a fairly lonely walk for Carlos. And on the podium it is Riccardo Patrese finishing 3rd, who sprays the champagne. Of Jones, no sign, and Reutemann does not look overjoyed. By the time the family reached Buenos Aires, Reutemann and Jones were on equal points and equal in dislike. But though this is Lole country, it was Piquet on pole. Nelson had ambitions of his own, Prost alongside him and 2 Williams cars behind. A thoroughbred start, with Jones heading off Piquet at the first curve. But it didn't take Nelson long to get by Jones. Nor for De Cesaris to add another excursion off the track. Reutemann soon blew past Jones, whose engine was down some 500 revs. The champion counter-attacked. But to no avail. The Argentine crowd roaring their hero on. As Piquet built up a position of solitary splendour, his teammate Hector Rebaque was beginning to threaten. First to fall to him was Jones. Prost was next on lap 10. While Nigel Mansell's engine caught fire, and Pironi too became a burnt-out case. On lap 15, to the horror of the locals, Rebaque overtook Reutemann too, on the straight. No miracle, but Gordon Murray's adjustable suspension, which created the band skirts on the track and lifted them off at measuring time. The Brabhams were so superior, the race was a procession. Alas, poor Rabake. A broken distributor arm did him in. Reutemann recovered second, Prost took third, and Jones limped home fourth. Arnoux was fifth, and before you knew it, Reutemann, smiling for once, is up on the podium while the band plays Happy Birthday. It was a moral victory for Carlos. The winning car, Piquet's, was unbeatable on that day. And Carlos's smile also says he is now leading the championship 3 points up on Jones. Imola may have been billed as the San Marino Grand Prix, but it was really a second Italian race, and marked by a row about skirts and Gordon Murray's device, which everyone was now honouring by imitation. And the good news for the Italians, 2 Ferraris working their way to the front as though they meant to keep the lead. Jones, having collided with Reutemann, was nowhere. And another victim was Guerra. The pain on his face is real. He's not the only victim. It's Prost, Jabouille, then Watson, Lafitte, and Villeneuve all come in. Villeneuve's decision being to go out on slicks. The gods, however, are against him. Rain has started to fall again, and he has to make another tyre change. Pironi now leads in the other Ferrari, with behind him Patrese, who has Nelson Piquet on his tail. Piquet tries it on, but Patrese holds him off. Piquet tries again. Again, Patrese survives, using superior acceleration up the hill. It is now very wet. While the home cameraman follows Ferrari, Piquet has got by Patrese. Incidents continue as Giacomelli hooks Chiva, and Chiva looks disgusted. And Giacomelli not a little guilty. The car you now see holding off Piquet is Patrick Tambay in the Theodore. And though it's a good purple patch, the truth is Tombay's not in the race, and Piquet very much is, looking to catch Pironi. Piquet takes Tambay on the straight and starts to attack the Ferrari. Meanwhile, Gabbiani and Alboreto have tangled. And up front, the race is tightening. Piquet is at Pironi. And Patrese is challenging Piquet. Piquet tries every dodge in the book. Probes, waits, tries inside, tries outside. But it's lap 46 before Pironi, whose tyres are wearing badly, finally yields. Pironi takes the regular line for the corner, Piquet takes the inside for the next, and that is that. He yields also to Patrese. And soon to Reutemann. The wily fox has waited and struck. Thus, a meagre result for Ferrari. But a brilliant race for Villeneuve, who almost made it back into the points. If Imola had been splendid, Zolder in Belgium was to be a race of frustration, politics and tragedy. Frustration over rules, arguments about who was cheating. The tragedy started on Friday in Zolder's narrow pit lane. Carlos Reutemann quite blamelessly hit an Ozella mechanic, Giovanni Amadeo, when he stumbled off the narrow signalling edge. Caught between Reutemann's wheels, he fractured his skull and was to die the Monday after the race. His fellow mechanics demonstrated, and a number of drivers who shared their mechanics' concern joined them. While all this is going on, the cars, untended, sit on the grid. Who is in charge? What's going on? No one knows. Television is waiting, so is the race. Finally, the drivers walk back to their cars. And Piquet goes off alone. The grid reforms, but hardly in good order. Reutemann waves his arms. Due to the long wait, his engine is overheating. Piquet threads his way between the cars. And now it's Patrese, his engine stalled, who is signalling for help. On the left, his mechanic, Dave Luckett, comes to the rescue. The race starts anyway. Luckett has no business there, nor do the race organisers to allow the race to start. Panic has set in, and disaster. Jones gets by Patrese. Cheever follows. Mansell squeezes past the hapless Luckett. But from the back, Storr, unsighted, comes through. He brakes, but he has no hope. Watched by the spectators and millions of television viewers all over the world, Storr's arrows hits the back of his teammate's car. And Luckett lies sprawled on the track. You can see Storr leap from the car. You can see his anguish. Before he's led away. Piquet goes through as the ambulance arrives. And in the confusion, as everyone stops, Piquet gets in an extra lap. A restart is scheduled for 40 minutes later. More frustration, more delay. When the race finally started again, Reutemann quickly lost his pole advantage to Pironi. Pironi, Piquet and Jones have taken up the lead, until Jones nudges off Piquet. Only to have his own gears jump out, so that he ploughs into the barriers, from which he emerges with a badly burned thigh. With his main rivals gone, who should appear in the lead but Carlos Reutemann? Position he held to the end. And as the rain started to fall, although it wasn't that wet, the organisers were happy it was all over. Reutemann looked wet and miserable. In the circumstances, the podium was no place for celebration. With Reutemann firmly leading the table, the stage was now set.